I used to do martial arts when I was younger, and I still hit the bag nowadays, but I don't really spar too much anymore, and I don't really do too much of the actual hand-to-hand combat like I used to do. And when I was younger, though, I would be doing this kind of stuff up until I was about 18, and I was in Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. We were doing Muay Thai, a little bit of boxing, Jiu-Jitsu, grappling, a little bit of everything, but nothing super specific apart from Northern Shaolin Kung Fu. And we saw a bunch of different kinds of people emanate through in and throughout those classes. And it was once a week for years and years that I went there, and sometimes multiple times a week. But really, though, what it came down to was discovering what it actually means to be capable of being dangerous, and what it means to express yourself in those times when you feel as though maybe perhaps you're in danger. And without a shadow of the doubt, every single man that I've met, or child, or whatever it was, whoever it was in those classes, the most dangerous of all of them were always the quiet ones, always. And even now that I'm a full-grown adult and I'm out in the community, I see the world, I'm participating actively in the community and being a willful participant to the society at large in hopes to become an implant, a better perspective, or do something for the greater good of humanity. And throughout those times and these last several decades, I'm 28 now, and throughout my time, I've seen a lot of different kinds of people, but by far the most obnoxious and the most loud and the most arrogant were the most innocuous, to be honest. They were a lot of the bark, no bite kind of person, but some of them were so outspoken and overt in their aggression that it's almost as if they were so outspoken that they wanted you to believe that they would do something that they were actually scared to do. And most people are actually scared to confront some other person violently. And I'm not advocating for this kind of behavior in any way, shape, and form, but something I learned growing up was that if you're ever in a fight, just make sure that if you lose, the other person knows that they were in a fight as well. And I took that to heart, and I took this to be something that ought to be demonstrated in your character as well. It's that, of course, you want to be kind and cordial and professional for the most part, but if push comes to shove ever, you want to make sure that you're capable of having that capacity for malevolence in some sense. And it's not that you want to do it, it's actually that you're kind of scared a little bit to get into that because you know what you're capable of. And that's the difference. You're not scared because you're worried about what happens to you. You're scared because you're worried about what happens to the other person. And that is a kind of danger that I have only seen people that are often silent and have these kind of more silent personalities. And it's not necessarily that they're all introverts, because even though there are character traits that are more, leaning for a person to be more extroverted or introverted, people, depending on who they're around, can be more extroverted or introverted. If I'm around people that are like-minded and that are really capable of having high altitude level conversations, then I'm going to be a little bit more extroverted because I'm actually excited to talk about this kind of stuff. But what I'm not excited to talk about is like taxes or like superficiality, the Super Bowl. Like I just don't care. I just don't care about that kind of stuff. And so I'm going to be a lot more introverted, and some people are going to be drawn to getting their information and energy and resources from drama, and other people are going to be drawn to get their energy and resources from wisdom. And I'm the latter. And most of the dangerous people that I've ever met, specifically the men in this case, have also been dangerously silent, because they're very observant men. They're very observant in their nature. And it's not necessarily that this YouTube channel is devoted only to men necessarily, but this is something that I think more men might resonate with, because it's not like I'm a particularly silent person all the time. I really like to be, I would like to be more outgoing and extroverted and excited and show my enthusiasm, but my life experience has dictated and showed me that really the only kind of person I can do that kind of stuff with is myself. You know, just earlier today while I was making lunch, I was going to say dinner, but it's a dinner meal, but it's for lunch. And I had some lunch, and I was dancing to some music while I was cooking. And I thought to myself, man, you know, I'm feeling myself. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling better, like, from this sickness that I had. Like, things are moving in a positive direction right now. I'm building momentum again. I've got a clearer set of configuration of strategies to implement going forward. All right, let's do it. And I realize it's like, man, this is the only time really where I cannot leave the Batman mask on without somebody trying to start something. Because when I'm silent and I'm just obedient to God and I don't talk much and I'm just very observant when I'm out and about in the community, people seem to have much more respect for me. And people take all of these people that are extroverted and hyper outgoing, sure, they want to be friends with them and they want to be excited around them, and they feel something around these kinds of extroverted people, but I've noticed a lot of the times these kinds of super extroverted people are not taken seriously because they don't even take themselves seriously. And so how can you be taken seriously by somebody if you don't take yourself seriously? And what I've noticed about the dangerously silent kind of man is he takes himself seriously. He knows that there's a animalistic element to his being that is not to be trifled with lightly or to be treaded on too heavily, because he knows that even though he's not out to get anybody or that he's not going to be intentionally violent, he knows that he has the capacity to do that. And so the person specifically that comes to mind is my Shifu, my martial arts instructor from when I was younger. And this was a man that hardly ever looked anybody in the eyes. Because from his culture, he was raised in the Shaolin Temple. And in his culture, it was considered disrespectful to look people in the eyes while you're talking to them for too long, because otherwise it would be seen as a threat. It's kind of like, not that I'm trying to compare anybody to gorillas here, but you know how gorillas, like, if you look at them and you make eye contact with them, they'll see that as a sign of a challenge. Yeah, that's how it is in some Eastern cultures, apparently, according to my martial arts instructor. So he had a tendency not to look people in the eye, whereas here in the West, we more see it as a sign of disrespect not to be looking somebody in the eye. So, for example, if I'm looking right here at the camera right now, you feel as though I'm talking to you. I'm looking directly at you through the camera. You can see that I'm looking at you, even though I'm looking into a lens right now. You guys can feel a sense of personhood and a relationship, hopefully a relating to this video in some way. Well, so in my martial arts class and with my martial arts instructor, he was always a very quiet person, even though he was a teacher. You know, he would always demonstrate his power and his aggression through his movements, and he would even when we were doing something wrong, he wouldn't say like, "Hey, you're doing that wrong. Oh, hey, hey, hey." He wouldn't try to cause a scene about it. He would take you to the side, and he would show you exactly what you're doing wrong. Like if you're doing a punch, right? And if you're doing a punch, like a 1-2 punch, I don't know. We'll take something super simple because there's like Pak Sao and Ching Na that we've talked about and learned, and we'll just get kind of lost in the weeds of the analogy. So, if simple 1-2 punch, a jab and a cross, and you're supposed to pivot with your left foot if you're not southpaw. You're supposed to pivot with your left foot as you throw that left jab, because you want to get the hips into it, right? And then as you throw the number 2, the right cross, you're supposed to pivot with your back right foot to get that hip motion again, because most of your power and punches comes from the hips, not necessarily from the shoulders. And the reason for that is because it's your center of gravity. So if you can get your center of gravity in a certain way, in a certain position, you can almost use your shoulders and your arm as like a whip with the hip motion to really get that snap into it, right? So, well, he would take you aside and he would calmly, coolly, but very sternly tell you exactly what you're doing wrong. Or if you persist to do it wrong, he would have everybody else sit down, watch you, and you practice the movement until you get it right. So it was it was not a very overtly aggressive, but it wasn't necessarily passive aggressive either. It was just, he very much knew how to stay in control of the situation and make you feel the pressure without making you feel embarrassed about it. And he was just a very, very brilliant in that kind of teaching aspect. And he was fairly young as well at the time. Like, I remember when I was, the last time I saw him was when I was 17, and I think he was in his mid to late 30s. So, and I knew him for nearly almost a decade. So, yeah, he was pretty young at the time, but he obviously had the skills to be a great teacher from a very young age, considering the class sizes and everything as well, and just what he was teaching and his experience level. And so the point is that he had a very unique way about showing his dominance without making you feel like an idiot for it, but also making you feel like you're more than you could be, or you could be more than you are, rather. And he's on the side of who you could be. And so dangerous men oftentimes, in my experience as well, specifically with my Shifu, he was a kind of man that you would love to be around, because every time he spoke, it was like you were getting this sense of, I don't know, something from the ether, because he was just like, maybe it was just because of who he was as far as like a teacher and what he was teaching, but you got the sense that he was just really himself. Like he was a orderly chaos. How do I even say it? Like he was just a chaos tornado that was highly sophisticated and orderly in the way he does things. And he always made an impact wherever he went. He was just like that chaotic tornado in a good way, though. He wasn't trying to destroy things, but he was definitely capable of destroying things. I mean, he had the most beautiful kicks I've ever seen in my life. And to this day, even. I mean, and he was very flexible, so he could kick, straight up. He could do a full 180 with his sidekick if he really wanted to. And just the beautiful kicks that he would do, and he would never showboat about it, though. He would always be showing you for a purpose. And that's another thing, another trait about these dangerous men, is that not only are they silent and they have a bunch of wisdom that seems like that just radiates around them, but it's almost as if this kind of dangerousness is implicit to their character, and yet you know instinctually that even though they could tear you apart if they wanted to, they're not going to if you don't really like instigate anything. And it's a very oddly comforting presence to be around. You do feel much more safe around a dangerous person like that. In fact, I don't think I ever felt safer around another man apart from my Shifu, because not only did I know that he could fight, but I also knew that he was not going to intentionally try to fight me. But if he did, I would be it'd be done. There would be no competition, and but that's just the way that it was. And there was this element of respect there as well that you don't really get with a lot of different kinds of people nowadays. But I guess that was a bit of a story time for you guys. I've been thinking a little bit about this just because there's so many people out there that are trying to get attention and trying to get clout and trying to get this and trying to get that. And they think that they're going to become like high status, disciplined, dangerous symbols or something by getting this clout, by getting this status, by getting this, by getting that. And it's like, I'm not necessarily saying that you need to have martial arts background in order to be dangerous, even though I would recommend every man and woman as well to participate in martial arts, specifically the men though, because you need an outlet for that aggression that you have within you. All men have this kind of aggression, and you need an outlet. In fact, I don't think I would have been able to appropriately learn how to move through the world in my own emotions, because I was already turbulent enough as a kid and growing up into an adult as it was. If I didn't have that outlet of martial arts or tennis or basketball or other sports, if I didn't have that outlet for concentrated aggression in which I could be used, I could use that for productive purposes, man, I would not be the man I am today. Absolutely not. And so the most dangerous men are never the overt, loud, obnoxious men. Those are usually the men that have a little bit of vulnerabilities and insecurity problems. And I'm not trying to degrade these kinds of men, but it's more like they know that there's a chip on their shoulder, and they feel like they've got something to prove to the next guy. And I know what that's like because I saw that with people in my family, specifically the men in my family growing up. There's one uncle that I had in particular that he knew everybody in the town. Like every time we went to visit him or my grandparents in this town, like everywhere we went with him, he would know everybody. And I'm like, man, how do you know everybody here, man? But even though he wasn't necessarily aggressive or super violent, he did have a history, let's just say that. He did have a history of certain things happening, and he took those out on other people. He didn't know how to channel that energy into something positive. So he just took it out on other people. And my uncle, I'm not in contact with my family. For those that are maybe new to this channel or have been on it for a while, and understand that I'm not in contact with my family because of a lot of stuff that's happened. But remember what Jesus says, that he who forsakes his life shall find it for his sake. And that's exactly what happened. Is Jesus found me. I was the one that was lost. I was with him after that, ever after, but he was the one that found me, and I was the one that realized in order to follow him and to really be whole, I had to lose certain things and I had to let go of certain things. But really, those were not things that I was losing in the long run. It was just things that ended up having to be reborn in some way. But what I learned from this uncle of mine anyway was that even though he knew everybody, he was very popular amongst the community, and people seemed to respect him. But at the end of the day, they didn't take him seriously. They didn't really take what he had to do with his life sincerely. And that was something that, in retrospect, and in looking back on it, I think to myself, man, now I understand the certain kinds of issues that he had growing up, and when I saw him growing up as well, from what I heard and what I saw. And I remember, because he's an all right guy, for the most part, but he's just got a few things that he's got going on that just kind of stop and put an obstacle in the way of relationships. And that happens a lot in my family, with the men specifically. It's weird because the men in my family, for the most part, and I'm talking about like extended family as well, not just my immediate family, but the men in my family were always either hyper-focused on other people or hyper-focused on themselves. They didn't really know how to find the balance ever. And that was, I think, one of the most difficult parts in establishing how to properly integrate my dangerousness to my being and the kind of monstrous side of my personality into myself, was because I had to learn, okay, looking at these people and what they're not getting balanced, how can I do that? And how can I see, inside of myself enough to also see in other people, while not projecting anything onto other people, but also not putting too much pressure on myself existentially to the point in which I become a nihilistic asshole. And that was really my overall goal, in which I perceived to be the situation of how to do that. And that was my goal, was to really build a bridge internally for myself between those two polarities that I saw. And obviously the kind of genetic things that would be going on and all that kind of stuff. But the biggest thing that I've seen, though, even though this guy, this uncle of mine, he was very popular among the community, he was also somebody that you knew that he was a chill dude for the most part, but sometimes it was kind of like a loose cannon. And that just was what it was. And there was not much else to do. And of course, everybody changes, people change. But those were the stories that I heard about him growing up, and those were the things that I saw. So I have to go based off of that and then incorporate that into my own experience. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to trust your own experience. If you don't trust your own experience and you can't trust what you've experienced, then it's going to be very difficult for you to live life in accordance to what God wants for you. Because, well, how can you really connect with God if you can't first trust that you have a connection to Him and He has a connection to you? So, and that brings up an interesting point as well with the dangerousness. Jesus was a dangerous person, absolutely, but he was also a very benevolent person, and he knew how to channel that appropriately. He had a backbone. People don't like to bring up how Jesus whipped people. If you look up John chapter 2, I believe it is. I can't remember which verses it is in chapter 2, but he basically tells people that they've made the temple into a merchandise, like a house of merchandise. And he tells them to get out, and he whips and he throws the tables over. I mean, he was obviously he knew how to show anger. But then you also have these verses where Jesus wept. Like literally, that's a verse in the Bible, is Jesus wept, and it's upon his going to Lazarus's grave to raise Lazarus. he weeps like in the middle of the street. So he has a very broad character about, like, Jesus was not a very simple, I mean, obviously he is simple, but in a complex way that most people don't want to comprehend or cannot seem to comprehend, because it seems contradictory. I've had multiple people tell me this recently about Bible and and Jesus in general. Is like, it seems contradictory, and it's like, well, is it contradictory, or is it so simple that you're thinking about it too complexly? Because I know that that's what happened to me in my early walks and before I started to really follow Jesus. Was I was trying to logically put pieces together and not through faith. But anyways, guys, I hope this message was useful and insightful for you. It was a big story time, and really just drawing on personal experiences from all of this and for this topic. But I hope that it was useful and insightful for you. If you do want to join the Regal Change Academy, we do have the free Discord community as well as the paid Regal Change Academy. And in the free Discord, Regal Change Academy, you'll get a ebook available, and then also meditation guides, fitness guides, etc., as well as the godly community. And then in the paid community, we are doing a Legends of Stoicism class series coming up. I'm super stoked for that and excited for that. We're also starting a Maps of the Psyche class. This will not be a class series like the Legends of Stoicism or the Art of War that we've done in the past as well. This will be more of a weekly class where it's not as in depth, but it's still going to be something that can really add to your spiritual and psychological and philosophical understandings and foundation. You know, because that's what this is. These are building blocks for you. It's not necessarily going to be the end all be all. It's going to be a building block for you. Also, we have the meditation workshop, Godlike Savage workshop, the entrepreneurship workshop, AI optimization workshop. All of those you can do on your own time. But for the class series, specifically like the Legends of Stoicism, that's going to be an actual group event and class for a duration of time. We also have weekly Bible study calls as well as weekly Regal Assembly calls where we talk about a variety of different topics and subjects. I do appreciate everybody moving from the YouTube platform, also in addition to the Rumble, X, and Instagram platforms here for this channel. I appreciate your guys' extra support. Shout out to all of the subscribers, the channel members, etc. I appreciate you guys as well, and peace be with you. Till next time.